Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the 23rd India Conference at Harvard. We're delighted to have you with us. This year, the conference is centered around the India Reimagined, a theme that invites us to pause and reflect on values, complexities, and possibilities shaping India's future. Across the next 2 days, we bring together voices that challenge and inspire as we explore how India is navigating questions of identity, progress, power, and responsibility in a rapidly changing world. Together, these conversations ask what kind of India are we building and who gets to shape that future. Today's speaker sits squarely within that conversation. We're here to explore India's sonic futures, a topic that speaks directly to the choices India is making today and the futures that this will enable. My name is Suprita, and I myself and Anjan have had the pleasure of hosting this talk. Over the next hour, we'll explore how Indian music continues to evolve across borders, genres, and generations, how it carries tradition forward while creating entirely new possibilities. This session invites us to think about heritage, language, diaspora, and experimentation as we imagine the future of music in India. It's my absolute pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Mr. Sid Sriram, singer, songwriter, composer, and producer, whose music bridges Carnatic, R&B, soul, jazz, and contemporary Indian film music. Trained in Indian Carnatic music from a young age and raised in the United States, Sid brings a distinctive perspective to conversations about genre, identity, and the global future of Indian sound. His work reflects a broader shift in how Indian sound travels, transforms, and evolves across borders and generations. Over the past decade, he has become one of the most sought-after voices in Indian cinema across multiple languages, while simultaneously building an independent artistic identity that transcends conventional labels. Together, we'll explore what sonic possibilities are emerging at the intersection of heritage and innovation. We'll also leave time for the audience to ask questions, and we encourage you to engage in active conversation. With that, I'll hand it over to Sid Sriram. Please join me in welcoming us.
Thank you for that introduction. I hope you guys are doing well. I normally spend most of my time singing. Speaking is going to be a welcome contrast, I hope. And I'm really looking forward to today. What I want to, I guess, start off by just establishing a few contexts. Right now, the whole globe is on a precipice, it feels like, with so many shifts in power structures, in popular cultural movements, pretty tectonic transformations. Something that I've especially been aware of and keeping my eye on is the fact that the West is deep in the throes of chaotic transformation. And what I've seen when this is the case through the years, either by studying music of the past or just growing up and seeing how trends across the world shift, when power structures, cultural anchor points are shifting the way that they are, as they are right now, it's always a time that is fertile for new sounds, new sonicescapes, new themes from different parts of the world to really set new trends of how music travels across the globe. We're already seeing Indian music really, or Indian and Indian-based music travel across the world, happening at a faster pace now more than ever. And so that's a thing that's already occurring. But what I do believe is there's also a very profound opportunity right now to not only have music that is based in Indian roots to travel across the globe, but to really set new sounds, new trends for how popular music and everything that falls within that umbrella to set trends on a global level. With that said, I think the most robust, imaginative, and authentic innovation occurs by way of pulling from one's roots. We've seen it, I think the most obvious instance of that to me, since I was young, is looking at how black music has really set the tone for what popular music is across the world. And if you look at black music with its roots in Africa, and then spirituals, and then the blues, soul music, rock and roll, hip hop, so on and so forth. I think it's a very interesting look at musical lineage and how when a sound is pulled from an existing well of artistry, culture, so on, what it can turn into and what it creates is something really magical. So with that said, I'm going to break down today's, I guess, talk into two components. The first thing that I want to dive into is this idea of pulling from one's roots as a means to envision a new future. I want to do that, which is a pretty macro concept. I want to do that by looking at the microcosm of my own experience. That's one thing that I'll be doing. And the second thing is I'm going to play and listen, we'll all listen to music that I believe have been different instances of powerful innovation coming from Indian music, both from the subcontinent and the diaspora. And then I'll open it up for questions, conversations, so on. So when talking about my experience in music, I was born in Chennai, and when I was a year old, we moved to the States. We moved to the San Francisco Bay Area, and I was born into a family of Carnatic musicians. My mother is a Carnatic musician. She is my guru. She runs a school. Her father, my grandfather, was also a Carnatic musician, and it ran through the lineage. So I was given this form of music at a very young age. I started learning when I was 3, and from that point on, this form has been at the very core of my experience, both in terms of listening to music, understanding music, and also performing it. So Carnatic music is a very dynamic form. There's some specific nuanced parameters and rules that set the boundaries of how you can express and communicate through the form. And what has always been most exciting about it for me is the fact that one can find a deep sense of creative liberation within these parameters. The first thing that I want to talk about with regards to Carnatic music is melody. My relationship to music has always been one that is found deep resonances with melody and melodic composition. So what I'm going to do first is kind of break down my relationship to melody in the context of Carnatic music, and then break down and kind of trace my process through the years of melodic composition. So within Carnatic music, I think the most important core tenet or construct melodically is called a raga. A raga is a melodic system of Carnatic music and of all Indian classical forms. It's a sophisticated melodic framework, like a scale or a mode in Western music, but with specific rules for note usage and treatment, ascending and descending patterns, and characteristic phrases. Each raga, to me, the way I kind of understood it and how I explain it, it's a melodic universe unto itself. So there's these specific rules and, as I said, ascending and descending order, but then within that, there is a very nuanced and specific set of melodic phrases that make up each raga. So with that said, I'm going to just sing a little bit of one to better explain it, and then we'll go from there. And if at any point any of this is going too far down the track of being technical, you can just yell out boring or something like that. Don't do that. So the raga I'm going to sing a little bit of right now is called Karahara Kriya. And the ascending and descending scalar aspect of a raga is called the Aroganam and Avaroganam. So I'm going to sing that first and then go from there. Sarigama padani sa sa ni da pa ma ga di sa. One of the key improvisational constructs in Carnatic music is called alapana, and that is it's melodic improvisation, sans tempo, sans rhythm. It's open tempo, and you vocalize in a certain way, which I'll do right now. Na 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 la 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 na 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 da 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 la 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 na 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 So this is a short excerpt of that. So one thing that I want to specifically note is, in contrast to Western scales, something that makes the raga construct, in my opinion, really special, and something about it that gives you a ton of scope to imagine and explore within, is the fact that it's not simply just sa re ga ma pa da ni sa ni da pa ma ga di sa. That's the scale if you just treated each note as a flat note. What it actually is, each of these swarams or sargams, there's a specific kind of pressure, a specific kind of embellishment and bend that occurs. So sa di ga ma is a good example. Pa da ni sa sa ni da pa. So for each of these swarams, it's rather than it being a discrete note, it's an oscillation between various notes. And so this is the specific approach for this said raga. There's many ragas, and for each of them, they have their own kind of nuanced approaches that make them what they are, and that are very necessary. The treatment of the notes is specific, and it's necessary that you treat them in that way, such that you are exploring the raga in the way that it should be. So that's the first thing that I just wanted to give you guys an example of. Another improvisational construct in Carnatic music is called the Kalpana Swara. So that is associated with the composition, and these swaras that I was just singing, you employ those to the meter of the song in such a way that you sing rounds of exploring the raga through this medium. So I'll just sing a couple rounds of that as well. Triloka Mangalakara Nida 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 vahapara triloka Nida 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 vara triloka Maya nida 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 vara triloka. Just a few rounds. So that's another example of how the raga is put to work improvisationally. Now, where I think this gets especially interesting is taking the kind of core anchor points of what makes the raga what it is and applying it to different contexts and cross-pollinating it with forms of music outside of the Indian or Indian classical context. I went to college not too far from here at Berkeley, and when I first got there in 2008, that's when I first started experimenting with the idea of taking Western forms and putting them next to Carnatic music. The Western forms that I was most passionate about growing up were soul music, R&B, the blues, and gospel music. So my process of seeing how these things could exist both next to each other and ultimately within each other started back then. And the first, I guess, phase of me kind of coming to what ultimately would become my approach to melodic composition started with these experimentations back then. What those experimentations started off as was me singing, let's say, a verse of a blues song, and then singing something that felt like it was grounded in Carnatic music. So they were still kept separate. It was this silo for this style of singing and this silo for this style of singing just existing next to each other. So I think for that, I would like to give you guys an example. There is a blues piece performed by B.B. King called the Three O'Clock Blues, and I'll use that as an example to see, or to show you guys my first, I guess, iteration of these experimentations. It's 3 o'clock in the morning, can't even close my eyes. It's 3 o'clock in the morning, can't even close my eyes. Hey, if I can find my baby, I won't be satisfied. I look around me, people, my baby can't be found. I look around me, people, my baby can't be found. If I can't find my baby, I'm going back to the bottom ground. It's 3 o'clock in the morning, I can't even close my eyes. Which is an example. Thank you. If you guys noticed in that example, the blues is the blues, and then there's like a Carnatic section that I went into. I was kind of exploring the raga Abedi, and then I come back to the blues right after, which was for me an exciting starting point of realizing, I mean, there were many experimentations that sounded horrible, but doing it enough kind of got me to the point of, okay, there is something there. There is a resonance point. There's an overlap in some way. I didn't exactly understand what the overlap could be, but I knew that there was something there in my gut. I think upon further exploration, I realized that there are some key overlaps technically between both forms. When you have Carnatic music, there's a lot by way of gamaka, or vocal embellishment, and the vocal kind of bends. So, da-da, example. And in soul, you have your riffs and your runs that are not the same in terms of how they are executed, but I think at their core, they serve the same purpose. So, hey is still a certain way of bending the voice, bending the vocal delivery to express a certain emotional potency, if you may. So that was that phase that started in 2008. The next phase of this exploration was me taking compositions, either my own or existing compositions, and instead of having them exist as these two styles of vocalizing existing as two separate things within one, I started taking the ends of phrases of a soul song and treating it as a Carnatic embellishment. So I'll sing, one of my favorite Stevie Wonder songs is Overjoyed, and I'll sing that and attempt to kind of like show you guys what I mean by the ending phrases morphing into the Carnatic space. Second. Over time, I've been building my castle of love, just for two. Though you never knew you were my reason. I've come much too far for you now to say that I've got to throw my castle away over dreams I have picked out of perfect come true. Though you never knew it was of you I've been dreaming. So if you take that, so though you never knew it was of you I've been dreaming. Just the ends of the phrases are pulling from the Carnatic vocalization, whereas everything else is still staying true to the form of the composition. Another example of a song that's not necessarily R&B soul, but one of my favorite Alanis Morissette songs growing up was Uninvited. And in that one, not like anyone would be, I am flattered by your fascination with me. Like any hot-blooded woman, you have simply wanted an object to crave. Again, just the very ends of phrases doing that was my next step in kind of seeing how these things can start to not just exist next to each other, but start to intermingle just a very slight bit. This was, again, a pretty revelatory moment for me when I figured that I think the fear always when one is experimenting, especially in bringing together different cultural forms, is that it could come across as super corny. And that was the case at first, but then you start to find the subtleties in being able to do it in a way that still feels new, it feels like a new idea, and it feels like it's still true to the two or more forms that you're pulling from. So this was the next phase. The phase after that, which happened in the next, I would say, last 6 to 8 years rather, was moving away from this idea of just the ends of phrases, or just kind of just dipping my toe in the pool, but really diving in a little bit more deeply. In 2021, I wrote a song called Dear Sahana, that was on my last album. And I think this song was my first experience in both these forms shape-shifting in and out of each other kind of freely, without it being, again, discrete. It became more of the two shades swimming within each other. I'll sing a little bit of that song. I felt strangely in love, frail heart still there. I'm terrified by the way you make me feel. Won't you please let me in? Eyes weary, full of life. For you I put my fears aside. Just as quiet as dawn, you left in the early morning. I'm back again. Won't you please let me in? Found your number, don't know if I should call. All the different ways you make me feel. Could it be that distance made this love? This Sahana, you make me feel. There are some times that we fall from grace, searching for infinite alone. Oh, how I try to go on my own, but every path seems to lead me back to you. That's a little bit of that song. So here what was interesting for me is, whereas before the Carnatic bits or the soul bits are relegated to the ends of phrases or just these specific flashes of moments, in this composition for the first time I found myself swimming back and forth and within these two forms pretty freely in the compositional phase of it. So just to kind of zero in on specific parts of the song, the opening phrase is la 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 la, I felt strangely in love, da which are both like pretty, I won't say traditional, but very kind of clearly Indian-based phrases, but with English lyric. I fell strangely in love, frail hearts till there, la 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 la. Terrified by the way you make me feel, won't you please let me in? Kind of more traditional soul. Eyes weary, full of life, for you I put my fears aside. Oh. Again, so it's like this kind of constant going back and forth between both. That was a super exciting find for me, because again, for the first time, and just a quick, I guess, detour when speaking about this. I think what my specific relationship with melodic composition through the years and its evolution allowed me was a deep embrace of self and identity. Whereas before, when I was younger, I think these phases are very directly reflective of my evolution personally as a human being, not just as an artist, but just as a person trying to find their place in the world and understanding self. So whereas before, in the first example, these silos existed, that was very much who I was at the time. Right when I started college, I had like the American part and the Indian part, and I was hell-bent on not letting them kind of be in conversation. And slowly over the years, I was able to chip away. And I can't say I did that consciously, but the music was the thing that led me down the path and kind of enabled these portals to open up. But with Dear Sahana, at that time, especially with the first time where I found that I didn't recoil the minute I was moving between these two things. And I think that was very reflective of the fact that for the first time, there was a deep embrace of the fact that my identity was not siloed, but there was this continuum, this spectrum of lived experience, what was handed down to me, what I was passionate about, and what I'd internalized. And I was able to really kind of express that lived experience, that spectrum, in a way that felt super free. So that's that stage. Now the final, I guess, stage that I'm currently at is this idea that instead of moving between different forms, even within a phrase or within a composition, being able to compose melody that simultaneously feels like it exists in both places or multiple places, a true hybrid, if you may. And this is where I'm at now. I'm working on my next album, and I guess what my relationship with melody has led me to is this point. There's been a certain raga that's been playing around in my head since I got here yesterday, and what I'm going to try and do is see what I can just kind of come up with right now, and see what that reflects. If that is a dud, I do have a backup plan of a song I've already composed that should kind of like be a better example, but let's hope for the best. So the raga is Riti Gauda. Isa ga ga ma ni ni sa ni da ma ga ri sa ni pa ni ni sa da la 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 la. Afraid of the lines, all the time we define, all the way home. A lot of this will be done in kind of like gibberish, since I have like a couple lines written, jotted down here, but some of it will just veer into nonsensical lyric. Just afraid of the lines all the time that we find a way home. You will let me live. You will let me live. Oh, afraid of the lies, afraid of the lies all the time that we find a way home. Ah, tell me how to go. Please tell me how to go. All the way home. Afraid of the lies all the time that we find a way home. A little bit. So the exploration there, and again, it's still very raw and new for me, but it's just to really see like how how can one come up with phrases, melodic ideas that, like I mentioned, exist in two different or multiple anchor points, traditions, cultures at the same time. So there's that. I think one other thing I'll touch on before moving on is I sang Kalpana Swaram earlier. What that has really given me is a vision into how rhythmic phrasing can be inspired from this Carnatic music construct. So there, so this is approach to singing Kalpana Swaram. So what that kind of inspired was something that felt like more rhythmic approach to vocalizing, and a song that I recently wrote. The opening lines are, third world palaces resurrect in the wake of a failed dream, living through an experiment. Innocent sins are the same in the parallel. Evidence slides like a deer's being caught again. Headlight running through red lights, never was a fair fight. Everywhere long nights now. When the sunlight strikes, it's gonna hit the ground evenly. Awaken from your sleep, cycle's about to start up again. Whoa. And that felt like very much inspired by the that kind of approach to singing and improvising this way inspired a kind of lyrical rhythmic approach. So that is the first component of what I wanted to talk about, was this my specific kind of relationship with melody. I want to touch on rhythm real quick, and I could spend a whole day talking about the rhythmic kind of like backbone of Carnatic music. So instead of really diving into that, I want to talk about the art of sampling. What has been really fun for me is recording traditional Carnatic artists, either mridangam players, tabla artists, what have you, and using that, recording them and then sampling those recordings as a way to make something new. So real quick before we move on, I'll play this recording of mridangam. So there's that, and then I'll play you guys what I did with that. So first I'll solo just the mridangam sample. Alright, so that's by itself, and this is it with everything else that's happening in the song. This is unreleased. Again, example of how you can take. Example of how you can take these recordings that are very much traditionally themselves and then juxtapose them into different contexts. Do you guys want to hear another example of that? 1 second. So this is another recording. Again, this is probably going to be the intro to my next album, but I recorded a tabla artist, and I'll play you the original recording of that and then play how it exists in my track. Is it possible to get the volume in the house just a little bit higher? So that's the original recording, and then here's the song. I'll play it from the top and I'll stop it. I've just used those tabla bits as like these punctuations, and you'll hear it in a second. Later in the song as well, I'll just fast forward. There's an example of the same. It's a nice way for me to test new material. I did have so that's kind of like, in conclusion to that part of the talk, I believe that to voyage into the future fearlessly and deliberately, analyzing, internalizing, and pulling from one's roots can be and is almost always profoundly powerful. It can't be just a superficial skimming off the top of a culture, just a simple altering of the patina. I think it's really, really, really important that in the process of doing this, you examine what your roots are and you pull from it in an authentic and honest way, and also whatever other forms that you're voyaging into and cross-pollinating with, it's important to really take the time to have a deep understanding of that as well. Because only then does it not become a superficial coming together, but almost molecularly these different forms start to be in conversation with each other, existing within each other, swimming in and out of each other. And I believe that kind of process can be a very exciting, dynamic, and powerful way to envision the future. What's beautiful about India and music that is based from there is that it's such a diverse place. The music across the country, even within a state, there's such different varying forms of music, such different sounds. For me specifically, my roots aren't Carnatic music, but there are various artists whose roots are in folk forms or just other forms of music, and I've seen it happen where they're pulling from their own roots and throwing that into the future, and every time I've seen it done in a way that is rigorous and honest, it makes for some really, really cool new possibilities. So I think the last thing I'll say here is there's an opportunity right now, as I said at the beginning, that the world is obviously rapidly changing, and to reiterate what I said in the beginning, power structures are definitely shifting, and it's really on us to seize the moment and make the most of it, because there are always going to be forces at play that are trying to do so in the most superficial way possible, just to commercialize instead of really thinking about cultural movement and impact. So I think there's a great responsibility that falls on the shoulders of artists, both from the subcontinent and the diaspora. So yeah, how are we doing on time? I think I have about like 10 minutes, yeah? 5 minutes? Okay, yeah, so, okay, I'll just, before we start the Q&A, I just want to play you guys 2 examples of music that from the past that I believe have been really great examples of innovation grounded in Indian music. The first is by Charanjit Singh. This is called Bhairav, and it was the first example of taking ragas and putting them in the context of electronic music. So I'll play just a minute of that. I'm going to skip to the middle of the song. It's a vibe. Basically the synthesizer that is outlining the Rag Bhairav, and Charanjit Singh is a real revolutionary musically and a true trailblazer. The next one I'm going to play is Bird Flu by MIA. So here we take like Kutta beats, folk beats from southern India, and just throw them into the future the way she did. She's one of my favorite artists and a real, I think, again, true trailblazer. So 2 quick examples, and then now we can open it up to questions. Sure.
So there are mics going around, so you can just...
Yeah, I'll leave it to you guys to decide the order of.
Hello. Hey, well, this was incredible. Thanks. I feel like we're watching, dissecting how the music is made. It's really, really special. I have a question. It seems like you kind of arrived at, the combination of English and Indian music kind of at a first principles level. what is your thoughts on a song like Across the Universe that kind of did the reverse of what you just talked about?
Sure. I think that's funny because one of the songs I kind of like had here in a playlist of examples is Within You, Without You, which is from Sgt. Pepper's. Also does a really cool thing in pulling from Indian ragas. And I think I love those instances, especially when they happen. The Beatles being a really important kind of vessel to take music from India across the world, no pun intended, and kind of doing what they did. I was definitely a fan, and growing up, especially because growing up in the States in the 90s, we didn't have examples of people that looked like us who were kind of doing this thing. The fact that songs like that existed was very affirming, I would say, because it showed that though it was white dudes doing it, they still kind of like tipped their hat in the right way and maybe like showed us an example of the possibility of it. So I've covered that song a few times. Yeah, I'm here for it for sure. Yeah. Right here.
Hi, I'm a huge fan by the way. So my question to you is, since you have the base of Carnatic classical music, what are your thoughts? So basically some Indian traditionalists have this very, I won't say frowned upon, but a very critical view for fusion music. What are your thoughts on this?
My most fundamental thought is two. One is that like music sound can't be controlled. It's gonna do what it does, you know, no matter how many people try to gatekeep or constrain it. But so I think to each their own, but I don't kind of subscribe to the same thought process. But with that said, I think one thing I mentioned near the end of the talk, which is the fact that it's really, really important for artists not to just do fusion for the sake of it, or just kind of like appear to do it, and just, you know, I think that is very problematic, and beyond it being problematic, it doesn't ever lead to anything that's sustaining and that's really going to take the sound and the sonics of the country into the future. It'll probably live and die pretty, like, it'll be pretty short-lived. So again, I don't think we can ever control what happens, what doesn't happen, but I think for folks that are in the space of experimenting with different cultural forms and bringing them together and fusing them together, I think the most important thing is really respecting and doing justice to both of the multiple forms that you're playing with, and that takes a lot of rigor, because there could be an artist who comes from like who's been immersed in a classical form from India, but doesn't necessarily understand a Western form that they want to experiment with. So I think taking the time to really understand the form to the best of one's ability, or collaborating with an artist that's steeped in their own tradition, and figuring out how that conversation can be, you know, talking to each other instead of at each other. Yeah.
Hi.
Yeah.
Needless to say, huge fan. I just want to talk to you about the intentionality that you alluded to in bringing, when you fuse Western and classical concepts. I'm a student of Hindustani classical music, and I wonder if when you come into these concepts of taking the ends of phrases and bringing them together, is it intentionally experimental, or do you just chance on it spontaneously and then name it going back?
The latter. So every time it's turned into anything real and exciting, it's been an accident. It's always like me sitting at the piano without much to do and just kind of like, you know, melodically meandering for a while, and then chancing upon a moment, like maybe 30 minutes in, it's like, ooh, that feels like a cool thing to jump into. So, I mean, I just always voice note everything, so even if I don't catch it at that time, I can listen later and find little points in time. But yeah, I think the intuition knows better than intellect does, for sure. So that's what I try to follow.
One quick addition to that question. So purists in both classical trends of music, as someone mentioned before me, frown upon experimentations in how you get to a note. As a composer, what do you think it actually takes away when you don't approach a particular note the way it's prescribed in a particular raga? Does it take away anything, or what are your thoughts on that?
It's a super nuanced thing. I do know when I do it. I know when I can call myself, pardon my French, but call myself on my own bullshit, for sure. and I can feel that pretty immediately. I think it just comes down to like the process, the discerning, and the kind of approach of said artist. Because again, let's take an example. Let's say Kamboji, for example, is where do you go away? So like it's like not Kamboji when I did that second thing, but it kind of is at the same time. And yeah, I don't know what feels like. I know what feels right and what feels wrong. Like again, but that also changes over the years. Like when I was younger, I would do something like that and immediately be like, no, stop, like do not do that. But then just like something about the idea just stuck with me and I kept trying it. So something I might have thought was cringeworthy 10 years ago now feels like, oh, I've figured my way with that thing. So it's an ever-evolving process. I think, again, like whether something is right or wrong, especially when it comes to music, is a very dangerous kind of territory to swim into because like it's music. And I do understand that there are rules. If you look at Western classical forms, like harmony follows some very complex traditional sets of rules, and I think respecting and understanding those rules, this is the answer. Knowing what the construct defines itself, like what the rules are of said construct, the boundaries, taking the time to really study that and understand it so that you can then exist outside the bounds is probably my answer. Because one thing you don't want to do is like half understand something and then experiment, be like whatever, but if you've taken the time to really dive into a form and you know what the parameters are and you understand all that, then I think unlearning and kind of existing outside or breaking the rules at that point is fine. But again, ever evolving, for sure.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
We got one here.
Hi sir, can you hear me?
Yes.
So love your music, and I have a quick question. Since you talk about cultural movements and how it transcends and what you're working for, two main questions that I've seen a lot of musicians struggle with, because I come from Mumbai and I work with music producers as well, is relevance and virality, so that it transcends beyond borders. And since you're working at the Fusion, how do you deal with the first being relevant and second virality so that the movement actually goes beyond
Moves.
borders? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that stuff is really beyond our control, I know that there's like, people are getting far more savvy now and like what you can do in terms of like making sure your stuff is vertical or like specific, like whatever, you know what I mean? To be able to cut through the system in a way. But you can't control that, you can't, and I think creating with that stuff in mind is a very draining process. It takes, for me, I can speak from my own experience, when I have created with the intention of wanting something to travel, it takes all the joy out of it because like the magic of the moment is gone. You're like putting that pressure on yourself to make sure something performs well. I think the only real like thing is like really refining one's ability to pick up on when that a lightning in a bottle moment happens and not messing with it when it does. I think my best and most recent example of cross-cultural movement and something moving and really cutting through culture was the Tiny Desk that I did a few years ago. Thank you. And that was like the first time where I saw, obviously I've had a storied career in India, and but that specific instance was my first time seeing like me taking the culture that is so deeply important to me and putting it forth in a new context, both in terms of the platform and also musically. And I myself and my band and everyone involved, we were just really true to surrendering to the creativity of the moment, and it did what it did. So I think like my thought on that is just you just gotta put the creativity first, artistry first, and then as hard as it is, especially in this day and age, and then the rest kind of, God willing, takes care of itself.
Last question. So yeah, I wanted to ask, I think the other thing that's different between like Western classical and Indian classical is the notion of tempo being much more flexible in Indian classical. How do you introduce that? And then of course, I think the other thing is the storytelling aspect of Indian classical music, that there's a play or there's a story, there's an entire, almost the theatrical aspect of it. how do you introduce that into when you combine these three?
Sure. For the first, I mean, so my background in Western classical music as such is quite limited. But what I have like really spent time with, again, like soul R&B and jazz. And if you look at those forms, time is pretty flexible there as well. Where a song can start in one tempo or one meter, and then it shifts halfway through. If you look at like tons of Miles Davis recordings, so on and so forth. Then what I think liken Carnatic music to, or like its closest parallel in the West is probably jazz, because of how highly improvisational both forms are. I think there's something to experiment with taking Carnatic music or Indian classical based music and seeing how it mingles and relates to and is in conversation with Western classical music. I haven't done much work in that space, but definitely food for thought. And then storytelling wise, I think all forms of music are steeped in storytelling. I think it's like just one of the most expressive mechanisms for communication. With that said, I think, like you very rightfully kind of like pointed out, Carnatic music specifically, some of the compositions are based on Hindu mythology or the composer asking questions of God, so on. And I think that kind of core lyrical and conceptual spirit exists super deeply within me, as do all the other technical elements of the form. And it has informed the way I write lyric for sure when I'm writing English language songs, where I think this kind of search, yearning, and storytelling does exist in that context. And I'm sure I pulled it from here. I think we're all set. Thank you guys.